Once upon a time, there was a curious young prince who wanted to take a walk without an escort. Walking through a poor area of the city, he found a boy of his height who was exactly like him. The prince said to the pauper,
"What a coincidence! We are like two peas in a pod."
"That is true, but I'm dressed in rags, and you are covered in silk and velvet. I would be so happy if I could wear your clothes for just a moment."
The prince then took off his suit and shoes, and his chain from the Order of the Serpent, which was full of precious stones. The prince then dressed in the pauper's clothes and said,
"You are exactly like me."
Just then, the guards came looking for the prince and took the pauper dressed as he was in the prince's clothes. The prince ran after them, trying to convince them of their mistake, but it was useless. He told the whole city who he was, and they just thought that he was crazy. Tired of proclaiming his identity in vain, he searched the city for work. He performed the most terrible jobs for a miserable wage. When he was older, war broke out with a neighboring country. The prince, led by his love for his country, joined the army. Meanwhile, the pauper occupied the throne and lived a life of leisure. One day, in one of the hardest battles, the young soldier went looking for the general. With amazing audacity, he told him that he used his troops badly and that the king, with a great strategy, would have planned the battle differently.
"How do you know that our beloved monarch would have done it like that?" "Because he taught me everything he knew. He was my father."
That night, the old king died, and the pauper came to the throne. Full of resentment because of the misery he had experienced in his life and anxious for wealth, he began to oppress the people. Meanwhile, the true prince was a young soldier who, outside the gates of the palace, waited for the pauper imposter to recognize the deception. Disorientated, the general followed the advice of the soldier and defeated the enemy. He then went in search of the young man who was bathing a shoulder wound in the stream. On his neck were 3 red stripes.
"It is the mark I saw on the newborn prince,"
cried the general. He understood then that the person who sat upon the throne was not the true king. He discovered the deception and put the crown on the head of its rightful owner. The prince had suffered a lot and knew how to forgive, so the impostor's only punishment was to work every day. When the people praised the king's ability to rule and his great generosity, he responded,
"It is thanks to having lived and suffered with the people that I may be a good king."